Well, hi everyone. Tuesday, the 8th of July, Club Grubbery coming to you from here in northern New South Wales. John's in Port Macquarie and Professor Angus Dalgleish from the UK. Welcome to the program, Angus.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
It's great to have you. The reason we got you on, and thank you for coming on at short notice, was there was a program on Australia's ABC last night called Four Corners, and it was called Generation or the Cancer Generation. Um, Many of us were hoping that they would be talking about some of the possible causes a little more honestly. While there are some concerns about the cancer rates in Australia, you and Professor Paul Marrick were in this country to warn our politicians and others of the pending dangers, and you've seen this coming for a long time, but you seem to be largely ignored. So you have witnessed the program last night, and we're looking forward to a balanced appraisal of what you saw, what is actually happening, and where we go from here. But before we do that, rather than me introduce you, can you give us some background of your qualifications and experience?
Well, first of all, relevant to this, I'm an oncologist, and I have been professor of oncology at the University of London since 1992, and was made principal of an Institute of Cancer Vaccines and Immunotherapy in 2000. I have done enormous amount of extra research over my life onto causes of cancer, and one of the big things I focused on was how viruses can cause cancer. And then the second thing I came across was why so many cancers come out of inflammatory conditions, not necessarily caused by viruses. And with Kenna Byrne, who's a professor in Brisbane, we put together all the theories that chronic inflammation per se was a major driver of cancer, and the chronic inflammation induced immune suppression and growth factors for cancer. So I'm just basically reiterating I have a very long, in-depth scientific understanding and research into the causes of cancer, and hopefully that has led to new ways to approach the treatment thereof.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And so the program last night, you've been, as you said prior to us recording this interview, you've been very concerned about microplastics and other things involved in bowel cancer. Touch on some of those aspects of what you gleaned from the Four Corners program last night.
Well, first of all, the Four Corners program, I think it's done a very good job of highlighting the fact there is something going on. The first thing that I would say is that this has been going on for at least 2 decades. I remember surgeons coming to me and saying, something's going on, Gus, here. We're seeing young people with more aggressive cancers, particularly colorectal, and there's a slight difference in histology. And in that program last night, they inferred that in the younger group, there's a slight difference in this genetic signature as opposed to the older group and my generation. So that something has been affected in the environment one way or the other. And I don't dispute that. And all this occurred long before the COVID issue. It was interesting that they didn't mention anything about the possibility of the COVID vaccine program unleashing cancers in some of these people. I'm not saying necessarily that the vaccine was necessarily causing things, but we do know it's capable of unleashing control, and that was my big warning. And I think it goes back to January 22, when I was seeing an excess of cancer patients presenting who'd been stable for years. So they'd been stable for over 5 years, some 15 years, and they were then losing control of the cancer. And it was always with a booster. It was never the first two vaccines, it was always the booster. And if they'd had two or more boosters, the greater the chances of the cancer being more aggressive. And I think it's well worth pointing this out that the science behind this is very, very strong. Because after the booster, which I've always said, if you read the history of vaccines, any vaccine needs a booster doesn't work. So the whole concept is a complete failure. It suppresses the T cell response. Now, I thought that this was just something that might have been happening with the COVID, but no, it's actually documented in other vaccines when they've gone for booster programs. But the T cell suppression in cancer patients, and there's very, very good studies on this by other groups. I don't need to even to say our own work on this. It shows that it's actually much worse in cancer patients who receive COVID vaccine boosters, and that there's a trigger switch of the antibodies from being potentially neutralizing and clearance to tolerizing. So you couldn't introduce a worse environment in a cancer patient if you were trying to make it up, some stealth way of getting their cancer to come back to try to kill them. I mean, it's unbelievable. And based on that, I think that any chief medical officer, a scientific officer, who's basically ignored this is guilty of serious negligence because the science is so very strong on this. And just before I go off that, I had the last time I gave a talk, this is after Australia, I'd been provided with help from people researching this 13 ways in which messenger RNA vaccines can actually induce or promote cancer in their own right. I've had that recently upgraded to 17 ways. So the idea that this is not important is I think it's really ridiculous. But back to that program, I do think that there's something going on before the vaccine issue came in, and I do think it has to be environmental. Those of us, some very good colorectal people I've worked and published with, and I'd just like to reinforce one of the things that I think was the strongest we did. We showed that people with colorectal cancer have marked immune suppression. And we showed that, to me, this is one of the clearest pieces of a scientific explanation of how cancers evolve, is that when the surgeons removed those cancers, and they could remove them completely because they hadn't spread, the immune suppression automatically corrected itself. A month later, the immune system came back to normal. Now, we did this in dozens of patients. So the only conclusion is the vaccine causes this the tumor causes this severe immune suppression. And of course, it has to in order to survive. So we go back to what causes the tumor and why does the tumor cause this immune suppression? Well, we postulated, and I think this explains the vast majority, is these tumors arise out of chronic inflammatory backgrounds. Ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, well known to people to be associated with a much higher risk of colon cancer. And then polyps. I mean, most people are aware of polyps because they have colonoscopies to check whether they have them, and they run in families, etc. Well, these are inflammatory conditions. And what Ken Byrne and I showed was that these inflammatory conditions are associated with a knock-on immune suppression. So we were able to put the inflammation, growth factors, and immune suppression all together. So something is bringing forward this activity in the young people. And we felt at the time, and I'm talking before microplastics here, we felt it had to be diet related due to the switch of food from being fresh and homegrown, etc., to being stored full of salt and nitrates and things like that. This had to have a major role, and we're already shouting about the need to reduce these processed foods. But they did raise the microplastics in that program last night, and I must say I've been exposed all the time to, if you don't do this, that and the other, not drive your car, all this climate change nonsense, which I believe is the second biggest scam, in fact, probably bigger than the COVID scam, which I now think in retrospect, it was a total, utter, unnecessary scam inflicted on the population. Climate change is exactly the same. So when I try and point out there's absolutely nothing you can do about the climate change, man is really incapable of doing anything about it because it's happened all, long before we were thought of or born, climate change was occurring. And I point out when people come to London, I say, go to the Tate Gallery, see all the pictures of everybody skating on the Thames, which they did for 3 months in the 18th century in the winter. It was that frozen. And I said, go and see what they found when they dug deep to build the Shard. When they did the digging for the Shard, the foundations of the tallest building in London, they found evidence of sharks and complete tropical ocean there. So we know climate's happened, all the time. So when I have to put up with these nutters who basically want me to alter my lifestyle for this, I say, look, focus on something important. Microplastics. We now know that we can find microplastics in the brain of people at autopsy. To me, this is something far, far more important and something we can actually do something about. Do the microplastics cause the cancer? We don't know. And if they do, is it direct or is it indirect by having some kind of knock-on effect on the microbiome, which is a very topical thing for especially colorectal cancer, is the fact we have hundreds and hundreds of bugs. And we know they can be altered by all sorts of things, antibiotics and other drugs and diet. We know diet. One of the best ways to have a good microbiome is to switch from a processed food diet to a high fiber diet. And that will nearly it will certainly improve your microbiome. You don't need an awful lot of these fancy inputs, and even at the far extreme, they talk about transplants, etc.
Mhm.
So that to me is something that's really, really important to address. Now, the other thing, the knock-on effect from what I've spoken about, so I'm just reiterating what I have been mentioning is, I spoke about the tumours, how they cause immune suppression, how we came upon the activation, etc., in inflammation. We got that picture. The picture we've got from COVID vaccination is this was a vaccine program inflicted on virtually everybody, which without any evidence that it worked, indeed ignoring all the evidence that I and my colleagues saying this will never ever work. And this is the reason why we examined 20 years of coronavirus vaccines, said no, it will never ever work for the following reasons. So they did that, right. So I'm settling here. I'm not blaming the COVID vaccine for this generation thing. It might speed it up, enhance it in people who've had it recently. But what I'm using it is to say that I spent my whole life actually ignoring a lot of what I was taught. Half of what I was taught as a medical student turned out to be complete rubbish. And possibly that half of what people have been taught now, well, I know it's a hell of a high thing that they're being told total utter rubbish, like that the vaccine saved millions of lives and it's safe. And all that's complete rubbish. But what it's made me look at is something that I said would be very dangerous if we didn't actually address the damage of the COVID vaccines. People would stop having other vaccines. And this in the UK is really happening. Half the number of people now in some areas of the UK getting measles, and all the other vaccines they say are really, really important. But it's made me look at the vaccine. Sorry, we have accepted all the stuff about vaccines. And now we have evidence that we were lied to, lied by the politicians, we were lied to by the doctors and the scientists. Unbelievable. What about the rest of the vaccines? How really reliable? Were they all rolled out in exactly the same way? Well, I'm very suspicious now about the human papillomavirus vaccine. And I think there's enough red flags on that to basically say, halt, what's going on here? I'm not going to go into all the details of that. It's a thing. It's a special topic in its own right. What I am going to go back is, though, what I have uncovered, especially by my doctor colleagues, when I actually said, Robert Kennedy has done an actually superb job in challenging the medical profession on a whole range of issues. And they say, well, he's a nutcase, and they say all these terrible disparaging things about him. But I said, have you ever read all the work that he's done? In fact, he's a far, far better scientists, and nearly all the doctors I know and so-called pony scientists, I call them, because they only accept things which agrees with their etc. Now, what Kennedy has made us realize and go back is that with regards to the vaccines, that when I was a kid, we probably had half a dozen at the most. And very importantly, we had BCG, which really boosts your T cell response. I was horrified to find back, looking backwards, that kids can have 50 or more vaccines by the time they're 18. Now, this is pre-messenger RNA, and they want to solve this problem with messenger RNA, which actually make things even worse. Uh, all these vaccines require an adjuvant, which is something that says to the immune system, I'm dangerous, wake up and see me, and then imprint me, etc. These adjuvants have all been heavy metals. They've all known to be neurotoxic. So one or two you might get away with, aluminium, mercury, etc. But to have 50 of them, no, I think that this is really highlighted. We need to look right back and ignore all the prejudices that we have had. It may well be a result of the vaccine program that these poor kids have been inflicted with. In addition, we now have a politician and a medical class that says, "Oh, great! There's a new vaccine come along. We must give it to everybody. RSV, shingles. I mean, I get it from my general practice. In a monthly, they found some new jab that I'm eligible for. This is the worst thing you can possibly do. Is continually activate immune system unnecessarily, because the activation induces the immune suppression in a small way, even if it doesn't do it in a large way. So you see where I'm coming from is that there's been something going on long before the COVID, but the COVID's actually been a very good red flag as to what has been going on. In fact, the medical profession and the public health and all those people, I believe, haven't been doing their job properly. And this program has been very useful because it's highlighted the problem. It suggested that might be something in the food. They suggested it's microplastics, but they've only just scratched the surface. And I think they now need to go deeper. There's something far more sinister going on and with regards to food and exposure. And we have to, and I think I really plead with everybody, put your prejudice aside. You actually have to ask, are all these vaccines really worth it? Because the one thing that got me the graph from the Children's Health Defense Organization in the United States, one thing you cannot ignore is that there's an exponential link between autism and the number of vaccines. So there's no one vaccine. You're not talking blaming. It is the number. The more vaccines they have, the greater the autism thing. Doesn't mean causality, but now we have a duty to really look at this stuff and throw our prejudices away. And so, if that program last night, I mean, it wasn't complete in any way at all, but if it's done anything, it should be to open the door to, hey, let's look at all this, go through the evidence in a Sherlockian or a Christian way. There are many potential villains in the room. Which one is it? And like those allegories of crime things I was referring to, it may be more than one. You don't go looking for just one thing. It may be a cumulative thing. So that's in short is my take on that last night.
Thanks, Gus. John.
Gus, the thing that I found a bit odd was they were talking about the rise since the 2000s, but they didn't actually give any data on the actual rises themselves. There was a Dr. Strasser talked about 200 presentations of a real liver cancer that they're now seeing 3,000 a year of. But do you think that perhaps they were using this program as a bit of a shield? Because, I mean, there was not one mention of a vaccine. I mean, whether it be an mRNA vaccine or a tetanus vaccine, I mean, that is the one thing that we are putting into our bodies that we know is going into the bodies, that we can conclusively say the majority of people around the world are vaccinated. But it's just been ignored. I mean, have these cancers risen since? Has there been a big spike since the mRNA COVID vaccines? That program last night didn't really identify that.
No, I mean that's very true. They clearly didn't want to even consider that as a possibility. I go along with that. Because the media has been told that. I mean, what I found out, not only in the Australian media but the UK media, is that the government put heavy pressure on them to say that any criticism of the vaccine program is regarded as an offence, that because you could interfere with public. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's Orwellian and totalitarianistic control, and it's. I mean, it really is. Extreme rubbish for them to do that. But what we do know, I know that there is good Australian data, and we actually know that the Australians wanted to destroy their vaccine database, which they said so they'll be able to better understand the effects of vaccine and benefit, etc. So why would they want to suddenly get rid of it? Now, I mention that because it's inconvenient truth that obviously otherwise no way in the world they'd want to get rid of it. But we know that there's been a tremendous spike in the cancer incidence in Australia since the vaccine program, the COVID vaccine was rolled out. And I know that from when I was over and talked to everybody. And that we also know that they were being punished for even suggesting that there was a link. I mean, it is beyond belief that people were saying, look, I'm seeing an awful lot more young cancers here, and they've all been vaccinated. We should do something about it. And the attitude was, be quiet if you want to keep your job, or we'll send you off to an asylum or something for losing it. It was absolutely awful. So that data is there, and they're not getting it. So let's just look at the people brave enough to do it. Japan. The Japanese Office of National Statistics have released all this data, and it's absolutely clear that the more boosters you have, the greater the increase in the cancer incidence. What is interesting from my point of view from Japan is that whereas I thought I was seeing mainly, and this may well be selective because of my practice and the people I talk to, is those cancers which are controlled by the immune response, the ones we know we use immunotherapy for, etc. In Japan, it was all cancers across the board. So they were all increasing with the vaccine, and some particular ones like pancreatic cancer and gliomas. I mean, all the sort of rarer ones sort of jumping up across the board. And of course, what happens to these people who publish all this correct data? That there is a team which is funded by Pfizer and the NIH, according to sources which are on the Substacks, etc., who go around and harass editors to withdraw anything that looks like it's data to incriminate the vaccine for some link or other. We know that they are so vigorous about that in the first Japanese data published in Curious, the editor wouldn't withdraw it. The authors found absolutely no reason to. The reviewers found no reason to. So what happened? Curious was bought out by Nature Springer and the paper removed. I mean, that would have cost them millions. This is the level. And you only go to this level to cover up evidence if you've committed a very serious crime. So I think that the fact they're still doing it is basically mea culpa, and we should hold them to account on this. But unfortunately, we now know that this corruption of this whole program of gain of function, all that lab work, the fact that they had patented vaccines before even the organism had been made or leaked or what have you, is just a gigantic operation of which involved bribery and corruption at every single level. And this is one of the reasons why, I'm totally behind that we must withdraw from the WHO and the United Nations. And if I may say just how bad things are, there was a big meeting in Paris last weekend of a World Foundation on Health and Humanity, etc., having a big congress. And I was asked to speak in it with one of two or three people on messenger RNA vaccines in particular. But the whole scope of the meeting was basically, is it time to do what Trump did and leave the WHO and ignore the United Nations, etc.? Well, a few days before this big Congress was due to go and I was getting my slides ready, the French government told the director of the Congress and Hotel that we were a bunch of very dangerous people likely to incite riots in Paris and that they had to cancel the conference. So it was all cancelled. Now, do you see where we're going? Now, the first thing I said, well, this is another successful operation of the military wing of Pfizer and Moderna. And other people said, no, it's actually the governments are all operating this disinformation unit, which in the UK, I know I've been reported to the disinformation unit more times than anybody else at the last time of looking. So, I mean, what is the point of this? This is the end of free speech. It's complete suppression, and it's coming from the top, and it's straight out of the pages of 1984. And they don't see, they think they're doing it. And again, it comes from all these wonderful books that warned us of it, that they think they're doing it for the greater good. So as soon as somebody does something for the greater good, try and stop it and walk away, because that's what it's showing me.
Good grief. I mean, had you been invited to participate in the Four Corners program, would you have expected to have had, under normal circumstances, the possibility that an mRNA infusion may be contributing? Would you have expected to be at least asked the question?
I would have been expected to be asked what else might be contributing. People have said it might be diet and microplastics and everything, and I would definitely have said vaccines. Now, obviously, temporarily wise, it cannot be COVID vaccine for something that started 20 years ago. But what it does do, it's a blueprint and says, well, now we know that the COVID vaccine was passed off as effective, safe, and effective when it was anything but the complete opposite. How about all these other vaccines that have been rolled out? And they've just been approved very, very subtly, and all the ideas that there's great data of efficacy, etc. Now I don't believe them. I mean, I really don't believe them. I remember I came up in my research really started in earnest with HIV when I was fortunate enough to have chosen I'll do a thesis on how viruses cause cancer, jumped straight into human retroviruses, had exposure to HIV. So that's how I got into it. And I had first class experience of seeing how something's handled very close up. And I must say, in retrospect, I was naive, but could I have done anything more about it, even in retrospect? No. But basically, what I saw was how people like Fauci, etc., totally micromanaged everything. We thought it was fairly democratic. No, it wasn't. And if you want to understand it, I mean, there's two books that lay it out incredibly well. There's Ken McCready's, and the title gives it away a little bit. It's called Fauci's First Fraud. And then the second and subsequent many other frauds are documented in Robert Kennedy's brilliant book, The Real Anthony Fauci. And I suggest that anybody who goes on and says that he's an anti-vaxxer and he's an idiot and he's dangerous, I would say read both those books, because they are absolutely incredible documentation of how corrupt the medical and the science of the Western world and the politicians has been, and that this spreads into absolutely everything.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, Gus, look, Gus, I think the problem with that program from last night is that, from my point of view, it just seems as though it was a bit of a let's go down the yellow brick road and not talk about the elephant in the room. Yes. It was almost like it was a cover-up. Now, you would be best suited to answer this. I mean, is there, since the COVID vaccines, I mean, we hear a lot about the presentation of people with cancers that are very aggressive, that are well advanced, and there's not a lot of symptoms. I mean, is that something that you saw 20 years ago, or is that something that has just been noted since the mRNA vaccines?
But it's certainly been, I would say, it's certainly really been obvious to anybody with any wits about them the last 4 years. It was occurring intermittently 20 years ago in the fact that we were seeing these young people presenting with slightly more aggressive cancer. So there was something else stirring then. But the last 4 years, I say, it's gone through the roof, and it is so clear. And that's why I said the Japanese data. You cannot argue with it. It's 100% correlation between the number of boosters and the incidence of all cancers, and they're presenting more rapidly and more advanced. And some people would talk about the whole nature of the cancers changed. I don't want to go into that because I said the 17 ways the vaccines can induce, unleash, and promote the cancers. But we, like all these things, we did see it 20 years ago, but it was very, very rarer than it is now. It's gone through the roof.
And surely,
now, one of the things about last night, and this is what I have, I see patients. I still see patients basically for second opinions or what have you. And I can't tell you the number of people who come to me and they say that they've perfectly okay, they have they're really good, and then they have some funny symptoms and they're presenting, just out of the blue, they're having colorectal, they're having ovarian, glioma. I mean, all things just come out of the blue. And I find when I ask them, I was taught take a full history. What's your past medical history? What drugs are you on? What vaccines have you had? I find I'm the only doctor who's ever asked them, have they had a COVID vaccine? Have they had a booster, and when they were? And when I pointed it out, it's nearly always these patients, it's all come on after a booster vaccine. And when I point this out, and I said, did any of the other doctors ask you about this? They all say no. And when they go back to see their oncologist and they say, do you think this may have had something to do with the vaccine? Because I put it in my letters that this person had presented this, that, and the other. They all say no, of course not. There's no evidence. Well, why is there no evidence? Because nobody is looking for it. They're not even doing their job. I mean, I would fail them for their FRACP or whatever it is because they didn't take a full history, and they're blatantly all doing that now. They're not doing what they were trained to do.
And how many people are dying in these old age care homes, days or weeks after having these boosters? I mean, they could easily access that data, but it's not being recorded.
No. No, they're not. They're not looking for it, and of course, with the other thing I think is important to be aware of is that the vaccines can induce not just cancer but all the strokes and cardiac things, and also, as Paul Warwick, will tell you, all of the 131 autoimmune and neurodegenerative disease described in the internal textbooks of medicine. They can do the entire lot. So when you say there's a spike in these things, they'll only look at one of these things and say, well, it's not that big, it's not that significant. But if you put the whole lot together, it's a mountain, it's a volcano of association.
And look, the other thing, Gus, would be surely. I mean, I'm not convinced that we'd get any assistance from the pharmaceutical companies, but surely health departments around these First world countries like Australia would have data on this. What is the increase in uptake of chemotherapy or cancer-related drugs, or people being put onto trials for very obscure cancers? There would have to be some sort of marker there as to whether there is an increase in cancer.
Yes, there's obvious marker, and any of your health authorities should be able to say that we are purchasing far more chemotherapy per population or what have you. It's something that they've been remarkably quiet about over the last 4 years. Before that, they would say, "Oh, we're dealing," and they use it in a positive way and say, "We're now successfully treating more people, and we're doing a very, very good job." But the idea that they're using more is something they're not really discussing. Of course, they're paying an unbelievable fortune for it. And the COVID has released the scam of the big pharma. I mean, the everybody is now being pushed to be considered for immunotherapy. Whereas 20 years ago, when I put in grants for immunotherapy, I was told it was something that only applied to mice and never translate to humans. At any rate, now that they've found that they're very, very profitable, I'm actually dealing with cases of people who are being put on immunotherapy with drugs that cost about 100 grand a year if you were to have them every 3 weeks for a year. And they don't even have the cancer. They're being put on it prophylactically. So they say it's probably best to continue it for 2 years, or if the side effects reduce it. You don't need to do that for 2 years, but that's an extra 200 grand or that sort of figure extracted from the healthcare system, totally unnecessary. So I'm sorry, there's a big thing going on here where the drug companies have now, I mean, just let us remind ourselves of facts. Pfizer and all the other big drug companies, but Pfizer's been the worst, has been fined billions of pounds, not millions, billions of pounds, for basically presenting false information, withholding important safety information, bribing clinicians, bribing regulators. Well, now they've got a full house. They do, the politicians, the WHO and the United Nations are all playing along with them, which I think is absolutely appalling what's going on. And of course, people pointed this out and assumed an association. When the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines looked like they were causing the cancer, what did they do? Rather than address it and say, "Oh, why and the wherefore," and stop it, no, they went out and they bought cancer therapy companies, biotechs. I.e., this is a tremendous source of prolonged income for us. Aren't we clever? So to sacrifice your own for your own commercial gain, which is basically what big pharma have done. I thought that nobody would stoop that low when I was young and naive, but unfortunately, this is no longer the case.
Gus, it was a pleasure to spend time with you and Paul Marrick in New Zealand. And some of the dinner conversations we had were amazing, especially when it related to uh, preventative substances or ways to prevent cancer. Because you and Paul Marrick have spent your whole lives working on the disease.
Yeah.
I think there'd be a lot of people really concerned now with the rapid increase in cancers for whatever cause that would be looking for something they could do in a preventative way. What would you be suggesting?
First of all, I mean, we've looked at this in great detail. I'm uh, uh, sorry that some of it's unbelievably boring. We found that the most important thing, certainly in the UK, but it may well be relevant to Australia too, because it certainly is to Spain, a country with excess sun. Was vitamin D and the link with low vitamin D and cancer and the failure to respond to treatment is so enormous. It should be the first thing that anybody gets checked and sorted out before they do anything else with cancer treatment. So I would apply that to the whole population. I'm amazed how low vitamin D is in our country, but then we're not known for excess sunlight in the UK, except for 2 or 3 months in the summer. But I was amazed. It's also a big problem in Spain too, and there several other reasons for that that might be relevant to the country. The second thing is I mentioned how chronic inflammation causes cancer. So you really need to have a maximum food intake of anti-inflammatory foods. Basically a lot of fruit and vegetables are anti-inflammatory. We've known just a simple little thing like a small daily aspirin once you're over 40. It's been said it's be good for the heart, but a lot of those big studies show that it reduces the incidence of colorectal cancer to their surprise, and that's just because it's reduced the inflammation and it fits in with our theory very, very well. But There are some other anti-inflammatory foods out there that I believe also got very strong anti-cancer. I mean, I'll just mention one. I mean, the pineapple core extract, the bromelain, I found is quite remarkable. It's very good for all sorts of chronic inflammatory conditions, and I've even noted improvement in cancer with people who've taken it themselves. I didn't actually prescribe it, but I documented it and found it was, there was a very, very strong link. So foods and things like that are anti-inflammatory is going to be very good for you. The second thing which I've been pushing is that the innate immune system, which is your what it says, the innate, this is your background one. This is the one that shields you and everything. The adaptive immune response, which is what all the immunological experts love doing, saying the antibodies are antibody to this nutrient. They're very limited because that actually is, I believe that is really trying to like scoring goals from the halfway line. You know, it's quite irrelevant. If your innate immune response is working well, then that will take care of your antibody responses and things like that because they're the frontline feeders. The point of this is that it falls off dramatically from the age of 55 on and falls down to the floor by the time you're 75. Now, if you put a cancer incidence curve from, say, 10 years ago, before all these other things really got into the picture, it was like a butterfly's wing. The cancer incidence starts to rise as the innate immune system falls. So I've been saying we should be boosting that innate immune system. And there are various things which I've worked with. I've worked with dozens of cancer vaccines, and the ones that boost the innate immune system are the only ones that have a significant clinical effect. And the other thing from a World Health point of view, which just staggers me, and in the UK, the only vaccine that really boosted the T cell response quite as well as anything else, none of the others do it in the same way, was BCG, which is the attenuated vaccine they used to give you for tuberculosis at school. And remember, and I pointed this out about COVID, they did a test first. So if you'd already had the TB, you got a reaction, so you didn't need the vaccine. I said, right at the beginning, why don't you do that for COVID? If everybody's had COVID, why the hell do they need a vaccine if they've already had the disease? Test it. It's bloody easy. You know? They should do that. So the reason I bring up the BCG is that there's some staggering information come out of the Denmark State Serum Institute, who've been the main makers, the suppliers of BCG now for a long time in Europe. They were staggered to find that the people who've had BCG vaccines have lower incidences of heart disease and cancer 50, 60 years on. Now, that fits very well with what I've been saying. And my point is that we had discovered that a super BCG, which is heat killed, made for TB, boosted its innate immune response really well. And that we were boosting the response for cancer and seen responses to it. I mean, it was unbelievable how much cause and effect there was. That the people who made that basically, you know, they've run out of money. So I'm running around trying to get this done. And I pointed out somebody very high up in Big Pharma was very interested in it, and the American scientific board turned it down. And they told me, they said, well, it actually would reduce the need for a lot of the drugs that this company makes so dramatically to interfere with their profits. That's why they're not interested. So this is the world that we're dealing with. So something along these lines would be. Now, what I'm hoping is, because as long as Kennedy stays in power in the US and Jay Bhattacharya is in charge of the NIH, they're both very, very interested in actually taking this further. And when I point out money, he said, if it's for the greater good of health, we will find it. So let's hope they actually stick to that, because I've submitted that this is what they should be doing if you want to make America healthy again, make it all people healthy again, is you're going to have to boost this innate immune response, which I believe is being suppressed by the bad diets and by the inflammation induced by a variety of mechanisms. So, you know, from a brighter perspective, I believe there is something we can start to do about this. We can get to the root causes and try and eliminate these. But by boosting the innate immune response of vitamin D and exposure to this, which would be no more for the average person than having a BCG shot. I think there's reasons to be optimistic and not all doom and gloom. But unfortunately, with our current setup of politicians and chief scientists and medical officers, until we get rid of this lot and this basically this sort of cancer of the organisation in dealing with this, we have a long way to go before we can actually implement what I believe would be simple, easy, cheap ways to improve the health.
Are you still promoting high dose vitamin C as well?
No, well, I've never promoted that. That's Paul Marek has
Okay. Yep.
promoted that, so I take that up with him. I've got nothing against it, but I don't promote it because I haven't researched it in depth enough because I've not had the opportunity. It's very easy to research vitamin D. You can measure it beautifully and you can correlate it, and it correlates with everything, and then you can correct it, and then you can see things improve. I mean, vitamin D correction immediately improves things like multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, a whole range of conditions. It's cause and effect. With the high dose vitamin C, first of all, you have to give it in high doses intravenously to people, and then you have to measure and assess it. That is awful lot more complicated than what I've been doing with vitamin D, where I can tick a box, get the blood result back, tell them what to take, improve it, measure the responses. So that's something you'll have to ask Paul Marek about in detail.
Yeah, we'll do. And we've got our own Professor Ian Brighthope, who's very well versed on that.
Yes, he's very keen on it too. Yes.
Yeah, and regards to you from him as well.
Yeah. Well, I must say, if Ian is solidly behind something, then I take it very, very seriously. I just don't have the facilities to investigate it in detail anymore.
Wonderful. We'll pass that on. I'm sure we'll be watching this program with interest. John, any further medical questions? I want to talk about the political scene in the UK.
Yeah, definitely. Look, maybe just a couple, Gus. What do you think about this continuation, especially in Australia? I don't know what the situation is in the UK, but the lack of informed consent in elderly care homes. I mean, people are essentially making decisions for their loved ones. They're being told that these vaccines are safe and effective. And in most cases, these elderly people are receiving 4 or 5 vaccines at a time: flu vaccines, pneumococcal, shingles, the COVID boosters. I mean, it's almost like a euthanasia program in by default, isn't it?
Well, I'm afraid that you've hit a raw nerve here, because in the UK we've been developing, there's been a lot of debate about a bill called the Assisted Dying Bill, which is basically, other people call it a euthanasia bill, all the usual things. And all I will say is that from my part of it was that when I was in Australia, I ran into problems with trying to relieve people of severe pain and cancer. And if you did that too much, then they would die, and you could get blamed for it. Now that's what I wanted them to address, I must say. But they made such a fuss about it. I mean, it's just unbelievable how a mess of it. I was reduced to actually saying, well, I don't know why you're getting so het up on an assisted dying bill when you've been doing assisted dying ever since COVID came along. You basically assisted everybody to die by putting them into care homes. The first thing, anybody who was ill, you put them on ventilators. Well, anybody with any respiratory understanding knew that would be the worst thing to do. And we killed thousands before we actually started cancelling the millions of ventilators that had been ordered. Then, if they survived that, they were put on midazolam and morphine, and that killed them. Then, if they they survived all that, they were given a vaccine. I mean, it's unbelievable. Why would you give a vaccine to somebody who survived something? I mean, there's no logic for that whatsoever. And then by giving a jab, you're actually, I mean, I'm seeing people If they don't go with the cancer, they're going with strokes and heart attacks. I mean, the people actually know. I've not been well since I had that booster. I had a lot of heart pain, short of breath, and everything. They document it to me absolutely. I said, "Have you told this to your doctor?" Oh, he said, "No, it's coincidence. It's nothing to do with the fact." This is what we're dealing with, and I believe this failure to look at the objective is an assisted dying program. Now, I used to say, people say, "What about my flu vaccine?" And I say, well, but pre-COVID, flu vaccines completely, utterly useless, but they weren't particularly dangerous. I've now changed my mind because I've seen people go down with severe autoimmunity having the flu and the COVID vaccine together. So I would say that this hyper vaccination is an assisted die. They say, "Oh, there's nothing to see here. We're doing it to protect them." No, they're actually killing them. And that's why I say there's such an irony that they're discussing an assisted dying bill.
Yeah. And look, finally, on the medical side of things, I mean, you won't find this unusual, but the health department, federal health department, in the middle of the night in early June, changed its advice on the COVID vaccine being administered to anyone under 18. They said that the data didn't support it, that in those cohort of patients, it was more harmful than it was good. We haven't had any press conference from anyone in the bureaucracy about this change. In fact, GPs, to the best of my knowledge, haven't been alerted. They're still giving out these vaccines to under 18s because they don't know the guidelines have changed in the middle of the night. I mean, it's reprehensible, isn't it?
It is, and I think that any doctor offering these vaccines to, to anybody, but two, any below 18 is an absolute assault of grievous bodily harm. I mean, the data's out there. The FDA released last week, courtesy of Kennedy's pressure, what they knew and should have released 4 years ago, and that is that the vaccines cause severe myocarditis in young men, and that this damage can be long-term cardiac damage on them, and that the evidence is that there is no benefit from the vaccine. That's taken them 4 years to release what they already knew. I mean, this cabal of evil, so I will put it, between the drug companies and the profession and the politicians has been allowed to go on far too long, and it must be dismantled. And I go back to the fact I think we have to leave the United Nations and the WHO because they drove all this. They're the only reason why the insanity was identical in America, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Canada. It was absolutely straight off the drawing board, identical sanity, and we should never ever go down that route again until we leave the United Nations, which I can assure you is one of the most corrupt organisations in the world, with its sidekick, the WHO, which I was on HIV committees, in the old days, and I saw it firsthand. It is an organisation to make various people extremely rich and tax-free. They do everything in cash. Why would you do expenses in cash, enormous sums of money, without checking any receipts? Because the people have no expenses. But this is unbelievable, and yet they deprive all the people who really need simple things. It all goes back to being simple. So they'll end up giving loads of money, and Gates is behind a lot of this, and Garvey, they should all go too, to do vaccines that there's no evidence that they're useful or they work or that they're not dangerous, but then deprive them of money for what they do need, like good water, sanitation, and education. I mean, I think that they're absolutely appalling, and you can tell by the way that the people who are in charge of them and how they got there, that these are not organisations for the general good anymore.
We interviewed Dr. Astrid Stuckelberger from Switzerland, who is a WHO whistleblower. That interview last week went for 2.5 hours, Gus, where she just presented one slide after the other, showing that Bill Gates and Garvey, their contribution to the WHO was equal to the amount that the United States was giving them. And therefore they have a very incredible high say over what goes on there. Um, we've got all that happening with the World Economic Forum still rearing its ugly head, and indeed your own Prime Minister Keir Starmer, in an interview on I think it was the BBC the other day, admitted that he would rather be at a meeting in Davos with the WEF than be sitting in the House of Parliament.
Well, I think I'll just say nothing, because you don't want to get me started on the Starmer and the dreadful British government, which we now find is everything. It's not that the reason we've had just useless governments for a long time is the system is useless. It is the whole parliamentary democracy has been eroded, and there's no really good, decent parliamentary accountability. Now, I suspect this might be very similar in Australia and the other places that have similar systems, but it's been hijacked by lawyers and these big central forces to the point where the governments can do nothing. People like Starmer, I mean, to me, he comes across as being so stupid. He's a process manager. He's got no vision, no nothing. He's pushed around from inside. So I'm sure he would be much happier at Davos than the Parliament. I mean, his own backbenchers hate him, as you know, that he's just stop him getting anything through, what have you. Now, the whole thing is an absolute mess. But I actually blame these big forces that are going on, the WEF, the United Nations, WHO, Gavi, all these things, Bill Gates, all these people, for destroying democracy by all their interference, quangos, and legal things. I mean, and while we're on this, I mean, when I've tried and follow the source where it all goes back to, the source of all evil seems to be Tony Blair. Tony Blair, got us into the Human Rights Act, got us into the European Human Rights Organisation, which are now preventing us doing anything. Cameron and Clegg were equally as dreadful, because the first thing they should have done when they came in is repeal all those acts and not realise the long-term consequences. Now, I'm no expert on Australian law, although I've been victim of it when I was there. But I would like to know somebody who's done an in-depth look at the Australian law. I wouldn't be surprised that similar things have been going on in Australia. But we need to actually repeal dozens of laws that have been slotted in to our system, which I believe have been done with malign intent to be able to bring us down and control us. That's exactly what we're seeing now. We can't control it, can't control our borders, we can't control absolutely anything of ourselves. And the two big things that are destroying democracy, one was the COVID and the vaccine scam. The second is the climate change scam. These are being used to destroy democracy so people outside can take us over and control us. And we've got to wake up. I mean, it's horrifying how few people there are like us who have woken up to this. But the good thing is, courtesy you continuing to do this, and the groups here in the UK and people like Kennedy getting into power, I think we will be able to reverse this. But it's been so depressing talking to my colleagues about so many of these things. I mean, I have colleagues who understand what I'm coming about, but they say, well, why does he regard me as a lunatic because I'm an anti-vaxxer? They have these conceptions. Anybody who tries to challenge anything and it is the system that's gets people to be prejudiced like that. It's unbelievable. The irony of like diversity, equality, inclusion, it is a cloak to exclude all the important people, to get rid of meritocracy and all the things that has built civilization. And so I believe that this is an attack from within, orchestrated from without. And until we accept that, we are in serious danger of a societal collapse in the near future. I really do think this is a very, very important thing to do, which is why people like us must keep banging on, because they want us to stop. They want to stop, like that conference cancelled in Paris at the highest level. There's no way in the world that we wouldn't even started a rush to the buffet, let alone a riot in the in Paris. It's absolutely ludicrous. But they're using these. They're the ones that are prejudiced.
Yeah.
You know, they're the ones that are exclusive. They're the ones that are suppressing free speech, and they try to make it out they're doing it for our own good.
It's
We've got to
amazing.
keep fighting.
It's amazing what's going on. I mean, we're in the midst of a communist takeover in Australia. There's no doubt about it. The re-election of Anthony Albanese is cementing communism into this country, and
Right.
that's clear to see. And we're seeing so much similar stuff going on. The woke agenda, which I heard a great definition for the other day, willfully overlooking known evil,
Mm,
is a great definition for the woke agenda. On
mm,
other matters, I guess that they're just topical. The royal family seems to be smitten by cancer at the moment, or stricken by cancer. You've got the king
mhm.
and also Kate. In your, I suppose, limited exposure to the data that's coming from those two particular individuals, how would you assess what's going on there?
Well, until given data to the contrary, I I will read it that both their cancers were induced by their vaccines. There's a conspiracy thing saying all the people at the top never had the vaccines, what have you. But no, they were. Kate was on the program on television showing it getting vaccinated and pushing everyone to be vaccinated, this, that, and the other. And we know that Charles was very, very much in favour of all these things. So until they prove otherwise, I would say that they're victims of the over-vaccine program and leave it at that.
As a specialist looking from the outside, what do you see the prognoses are in both cases?
Well, I don't think it's really for me to judge. I think there are plenty of things that I think should be pushed for people who have cancers exposed, who following exposure to the spike protein. They should undergo severe spike protein detoxification programs along the lines which are widely discussed, and Peter McCullough, Ryan Cole, and others have been at the forefront of these things. But the fact I can't even get anyone in the NHS to do, I could actually get the money for it. I can't get the NHS to approve to do it, is to measure spike protein and then do trials with different cocktails of anti-spike things. And the cocktails are not complex. They're quite easy, straightforward, and relatively cheap. No, they're not interested because there's no need, because there's no evidence. I said, this will give you the evidence. They don't want the evidence. This is it. So they're condemning loads and loads of victims. And here you mentioned them, King Charles and Kate Middleton, to this gross uncertainty when there are straightforward ways that can greatly reduce that, which they're being denied.
Well, I don't know. It's we live in a very strange and perplexing world, and Gus, you've always been very generous with your time. I know you've got to head off to town shortly, and I think
Yes, I have.
on you came on at such short notice. It was the middle of the night, and I'm trying to get you to come on, and you responded quickly, and I do appreciate that. Johnny, any final comment?
No, look, just to thank Gus for his continued smashing this out of the park. I mean, he's a voice of reason, and we thank him dearly from Australia for being a voice of reason and somebody that we can turn to in a time of crisis to let us know how it really is. And really appreciate you, mate. Good on you, and thanks for coming on.
Right, thank you. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed catching up again after spending all the time together that
Yeah,
we
I tell
did.
you what, I think John's got a good bottle of Australian red with your name on it, waiting for your next visit.
Right.
All right, God
Okay.
bless you, and thanks for joining us. And John and I will be straight back after the break. Thank you.
Okay, cheers. Bye.
Bye. Well, welcome back to Club Grubbery, where the rubber meets the road. Johnny, Gus Dalgleish was straight down the line. Look, he was. I thought everything he said was extremely credible. There was no real bias in anything that he said. And that was a really, really good interview, and we've come to expect nothing less from him.
No, he warmed up like a real good V8, didn't he? He set the tone for a great interview, and I mean, he called it as it was, Woody. I mean, he said that he was concerned about other things other than COVID causing those markers, and he's a straight shooter.
That's it, and that's what we want. We just want to present the facts as they can be gleaned, and that's why we say this is where the rubber meets the road. We're not out to prove one thing or another. I mean, if there's a chance that mRNA is causing these issues, then it should be openly investigated, at least to properly eliminate it and not just say, no, it couldn't be that. I mean, this is what we've been pushing against for so long. All we want is a proper evaluation. We need a Royal Commission, John, at least a Royal Commission.
Yeah, 100%, Hoodie, and the sooner the better. I mean, we don't need cover-ups from the ABC. If they'd have addressed the elephant in the room last night, there would have been a lot more credibility to that program. But it was obviously designed to take people down a pathway, and there's nothing to see here. Well, there is plenty to see here, Norman, and we're going to keep exposing it.
I think, John, that what we're seeing here is a mass manipulation to get people used to the fact that we're all going to be dying of cancer and other illnesses, and it's unexplained, and it's all our fault because we've eaten the wrong foods, and they're just conditioning society to look at everything else other than mandated and coerced vaccination programs that are killing people. Now, we would love that to be wrong. We've said it a million times. We would love it to be wrong, but it's up to the authorities to prove that it's not true. They have a duty of care because most people went along with their mandates and their propaganda, and those of us who didn't, I don't know anyone, John, who regrets not getting vaccinated.
No, definitely not.
Anybody.
And I think if they could go back and take back all the childhood ones, they would as well.
Exactly. And I think we've spoken to plenty of people, though, in the thousands who do regret getting it. And that's telling in and of itself. So I might close it with a prayer. What do you reckon?
Sounds good.
Lord Father in heaven, we thank you for the opportunities you give us daily to speak to incredible professionals and Lord, people who are doing their homework, who are brave enough to stand up and speak. Lord, we're happy to be called idiots. This is not about that. We just want truth because truth can bring remedy. And remedy has to happen before we have retaliation and revenge. So that's all we seek, Lord, is remedy. And we pray that you would help us to see that and provide it in Jesus' name. Amen. Great interviews in the pipeline. Great interviews coming up, including Professor Charlie Teo. We're just waiting to get a time set for that one in the next few days. A very busy man, but he's agreeing to, and not only agreeing to, but looking forward to being on Club Grubbery. That's a real coup, John.
100% that is, Hoodie. Yeah, he's got to fly back to China because this country's gone mad.
They've decided they don't want his.
What can you say?
They've decided that Charlie Teo, despite his brilliance, is just not for Australia. And I'm sure we'll get a really good expose on APRA and other things pertaining to his brilliant career. So stick with us. Johnny, you've often been heard to say.
You just couldn't make this stuff up.
You couldn't make this stuff up. Also, before you go, John, you will be appearing at the venue on the Gold Coast on the 19th and 20th. And you'll be there, so you'll be able to press the flesh with our fans from Club Grubbery, and you're looking forward to that event. I'm looking forward to that event happening. And as I said, I won't be there, but I really hope that it achieves everything it sets out to achieve.
Oh, I'm sure it will. So we'll still promote it.
Yep.
Hopefully they get a sellout, and it'll be a good event.
We need to support any initiative that's going to make a difference. So let's get behind it. So all that said, it's great to see you, mate. Enjoy the few days break with the family.
Thanks, mate.
You've often been heard to say,
you just couldn't make this stuff up.
You couldn't. Stay out of the trees, everybody. If you love the country, stand up for it. God bless you, and see you next time with Faith Ransom. and her mother Tanya. That was a wonderful interview too. God bless you and bye for now.